What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another Detroit Lions video, of course, but today we're mixing it up a little bit. We're doing a mock draft, so let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to our video. Glad you guys are here, and yes, we're back with a Detroit Lions mock draft, but for the first time this year, it's a Detroit Lions fully pre-recorded mock draft. I actually can't believe that we haven't really done this yet. We've done these all in live stream format, and it's been a lot of fun. Maybe I've flipped them and posted them, but today we're changing it up. We're doing a pre-recorded mock draft. Why today? I have no idea. I did a mock draft. I liked it. I was like, you know what? We're going to do a video on this. Now, some of my editing stuff has been acting a little bit funny, so if there's not a ton of like graphics and things that you're normally used to, that's the reason why. Just kind of keep that in mind. Plus, when I watch a lot of these players, I'm not necessarily clipping plays left and right. I'm just watching them and taking notes. In the background, when I've been doing anything really YouTube related, if I'm not posting a video, I've been watching draft prospects. I've gotten through a ton of draft prospects for what I usually do, and I think by the time we get to the draft, I'm going to have a ridiculous amount of knowledge and my own opinions on most of the draft prospects coming out. But at this point in time, I feel like I'm in a great spot. With that being said, there's certain players that I still have not seen yet, so I may not draft a guy just because I have not seen him, and I don't want to draft anybody that I haven't seen. Number two is that my opinions can absolutely change. Even the guys that I drafted today, for all of these guys, I've gotten through a good amount of games where I feel good about my opinion on them, but I still would like to watch more, especially for some of the earlier picks that we're going to go through today. So opinions can absolutely change, and that's one thing that I like doing with a lot of these mock drafts is kind of changing it up. You know, I don't like doing every live stream and then drafting the same player over and over. Even if I like that player, I don't want to keep drafting him over and over because it's just boring. And we know that the outcome, I don't know how it's going to go down for the NFL draft, but it can work out a lot of different ways, and the Lions have to be able to adjust and adapt, and they will. Now, with that being said, there's also trades to this. We're using the PFF mock draft simulator. Probably our next one, I will mix it up. We'll see. And maybe we don't even use one for one of these. When I do my prediction, I won't even use one likely. However, I do make trades, and a big reason for that is PFF has rankings, so you kind of get a sense of where certain guys are going to go, which for me, if that's the case, that's fine. If I know where a certain guy's going to go, I might get aggressive and say, okay, I'm going to go get this player because I'm expecting that the simulator is going to take him at some point here. So I did make trades. Yes, we're making trades. And I don't want to hear the comments. That's unrealistic. It's the NFL draft. Everything's unrealistic, okay? There are trades. But I will say this. I did follow the trade value chart and try to make these things about even when I did these trades. So it wasn't just like, oh, is the simulator going to accept this? If y'all know with PFF, sometimes you can be real sneaky with some of your trades. I didn't do any of that, all right? I followed the trade value chart, and they were all accepted. You know, there was no issue because for the most part, I think they were all like 100%. One was like 96% because I just followed the trade value chart. So with all that being said, let's waste no more time. Let's get right into it. I wish there was a way to make the suspense cooler. Like, hey, man, let's start off with the 7th round. Like, that doesn't make any sense, though, if I do that. So we have to start from the top. And we're going to start, as usual, with a trade. Now, I do think that this is a spot where absolutely there could be some movement for the Lions, whether that's up or down. I know a lot of Lions fans, especially those that will be there on draft night for day one, would love to see them not trade down and move out of the first round. But this does feel like a spot where, one, a lot of movement can take place just because of a lot of teams having different grades once you get to this spot in the draft. There could be certain teams that are sitting there saying, we don't got a first-round guy here. Other teams saying, man, that last one's just chilling there. We have to go get him. So I do think that there could be movement at the spot for the Lions, no question. It could be very aggressive, though I don't necessarily expect that. I could see it being a little bit aggressive and going up a few spots for a player, but also dropping out or just sitting there at 29. Like there's no, you don't have to move, right? Teams pick at the back end of the first round, and if the Lions just didn't move whatsoever, I could do the mock draft simulator 100 times, and I could take a player that I felt good about at 29. Like you absolutely can. You just take who your best player is at that spot. So this doesn't have to be a spot that the Lions move. However, again, knowing the simulator, I know this guy was going to be taken if I did not move, but I love it for this mock draft, and actually I did take him in our last mock draft, so I apologize. This is someone that is coming back and returning from a last live stream mock draft, but I really like the player, and as of right now, I'm on board with thinking that this just makes a ton of sense for the Lions. So the trade that we made was with division rival Green Bay Packers. Now again, hey, it's the Packers. You can't trade with the Packers. Well, we do. All right, we traded with the Vikings. Lions have been willing to trade in division. Now, will the other team be interested in that? I don't know. Again, I followed the trade value chart, so the trade is as follows. I gave up pick number 29 to move up to pick 25. So I just moved up 4 spots with Green Bay. In return, they received the number 73 pick, which is at the top of the 3rd round. I got back the number 88 pick and 126, and those pretty much evened out using the trade value chart. So essentially all I did was move back 15 spots from pick number 73, and I also acquired a 4th round pick, which for me is something I always like to do when I'm moving in these mock drafts, just because there's such a long gap without picks. I like to have some flexibility there. It's tough to maneuver when you have that huge gap, especially looking at it from like in a real life sense. When you're like 100 picks and you're just waiting, it can be difficult without going into future picks, and I don't like to trade those for the mock draft simulators. I like to just stick to what we have. It can be difficult to move around. So we move up 4 spots, and at pick number 25, of course, this was based on who was available, because if this player would have went before, I probably wouldn't have traded up, or I would have traded up and took someone else. Start here with the 25th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. The Detroit Lions select Nate Wiggins, cornerback, Clemson. Now, as you guys may know, my first mock draft that we did do, which was live stream format, we did not trade. We just sat there. We made trades, but we didn't trade there. I took Kool-Aid McKinstry, and that's a cornerback that I really like. This was a player that I had watched very, very early in the process, one of the first players that I watched during the season. I can remember watching and be like, oh, yeah, this dude's a stud. Then it's kind of moving on and then not really going back to it. And there definitely can be a recency biasing, especially when you're kind of like getting to players really late in the process and you're like just knocking out players left and right. That's like, hey, the most recent player that I saw, I like him the most. That could absolutely happen. That's a big reason I'm grading players as I go through. That way I can try to avoid that. And for me, Nate Wiggins was one of those players that, number one, didn't really have low grades in any category. At the same time, I think he's elite athleticism traits. And on top of that, the scheme that he's coming from, which was so man-heavy, whether that's press man or off-man coverage, I love how that translates into what the Detroit Lions want to do and what they want to be defensively. Also, I think stylistically, not only does he fit in well schematically, but he also fits in well to the other corners that we have. Listing in at just over 6'1", 173 pounds. I can understand that the weight thing brought up some concerns. I never really noticed it on film. This is definitely a player that I want to continue to watch, continue to go through games, and maybe it'll pop up more, and I'll change my opinion. That's very possible. What I've seen so far wasn't really something that bothered me when watching the player. The only reason it was really brought to my attention is because you guys brought it to my attention. I was like, yeah, that is on the light side. But it was never really something that I noticed when watching him. Sure, he's not built, right? He's not a big, bulky frame. There's cornerbacks that are a little bit closer to that category. You know, I watch guys like Josh Newton. He's like a little bit lower to the ground. It's like, okay, you could see that. Jarvis Brownlee, I love the physicality that he brings. He's not that, but at the same time, Nate Wiggins, it was never an issue that I had. What I do like about Nate Wiggins, however, is this. First off, he's only 20 years old, which it's incredible. I mean, you look at 2022, first time he's really getting snaps, first team All-ACC. Past season was incredible. A lot of 44 pass rating, a lot like a 43% completion percentage, had 2 interceptions. And when I'm going through it, I'm grading these factors for the player. Athleticism-wise, I think he's one of the best reactive athletes in this draft, regardless of positions. He'll probably be one of the highest that I end up grading. Of course, he's tested in well, 4.28 40 time. But I'm talking about just watching him on the field. I had these numbers after I watched him, and I was like, oh my goodness, the reactive athleticism is big time. Now, the ball skills, I think, were good. They didn't necessarily press the elite category for me from what I've seen so far. And those weren't necessarily just knocks of like, oh, he can't catch the football. They were other little things like hit and miss, finding connection on the sideline, and being able to bully guys towards the sideline, things like that. I gave him a good grade in terms of ball skills. And when you break down the different coverage types that he was able to play in, I thought he was very good as a press coverage corner. I thought he was great in off-man coverage, zone coverage, which I liked, though, again, I'm drafting him more for the ability to play man coverage defensively. To me, he just checks so many boxes, and I think there's still a lot of things that need to be tapped into. But when you combine that with the football intelligence that I feel that he plays with, whether that's situational awareness, good communication skills and man coverage, the transition ability, which checks a lot of boxes, a lot of different areas to play and drive acceleration, some of the best that I've seen. The run support's legit, and I'm not just talking about the 2 plays where he's tracking dudes down from behind this past season, stripping it out before they get into the end zone. Long pursuit angles that he takes, controlled run support with balance, change the direction as a blitzer, and that's something that's in his, kind of tool belt as well. And we know the Lions love to blitz their cornerbacks. They're not afraid to do that. Off-man coverage, one of my favorite traits was his ability to seemingly read a receiver's body language in terms of pacing, and he could just step on top of routes and just cut them off. In terms of specifically half-turn coverage, that's an area where I think some things could be kind of cleaned up in his games. I did have some body language issues a little bit as well, just reading body language. Press coverage, I mean, again, the foot quickness is absolutely there. The ability to stay square off the line of scrimmage. I had some little things like drifting over into the stem, so sometimes the hit anticipation I thought could be a little bit hit and miss depending on what you're looking for specifically there. But again, the reactive athleticism traits, I do like the size. I think he fits in schematically, but he also fits in well with the personnel that we already have in the cornerback room. That's not for me to say that the first pick has to be a cornerback. I like what the Lions have in the cornerback room with Amik Robertson, with Emmanuel Mosley, with now Carlton Davis. But my goodness, the idea of him opposite of Carlton Davis, the skill set offset that they both bring, but also the ability to really play off each other as one guy is a freakish, reactive athlete in man coverage, and the other guy can get up and just press you off the line. Though, you still have a player here in Nate Wiggins that's capable of that. He can step in the slot and do that. draft. I just love that addition to this defense. I think it fits in so well. He's such a young player. I love the idea of this pick. I just think it makes so much sense at this point in time. So I go with Nate Wiggins with the Lions' first pick in this year's draft. All right, continuing on. The Detroit Lions have their original 61st pick, and I did not move this pick. I stayed there at 61, but I drafted a player that's definitely going to change things up. Like this player, he's definitely more of a flash player at this point in time, so I'm a little bit like, okay, I really like him. I don't love him necessarily at this point, but based on what was out there on the board, changing it up a little bit as well. And I think the idea of, again, fitting into this defense is very intriguing because there's so much flexibility and versatility and just the way that he could play defensively, where it's like, hey, in the future, could I put him in kind of that Josh Paschal, John Kaminsky role? Yeah, because Michigan did it. Could I kick him inside? Can he play a 3 technique or a 2-eye? It's like, yeah, he doesn't really have the natural build for that, but he also did that at Michigan. And he has the ability to get upfield. He has the ability to play tack and react. And I think that's where he's actually at his best, especially when he's inside the tackles, the ability to just attack offensive guards and then react off of that. We know that's kind of like the Lions' mantra in the interior. So with that, with pick number 61, the Detroit Lions select Chris Jenkins, defensive lineman out of Michigan. Now, he tested out pretty well as well. You talk about a sub 5-second 40-yard dash, excellent arm length at 34 inches, 29 bench press reps with a 30-inch vertical. And this is a player, to me, like I said, he was much more of a flash player. He moved around a ton defensively, and he was also pretty rotational as well. He's 22 years old at this point. Good fit is that he doesn't immediately need to step in and immediately be like our best defensive lineman or produce and start. Like, this is a player that can come in and rotate. I think you could absolutely rotate with Lee McNeil if you wanted to kind of shift his body type to a little bit more of that size. He doesn't have like the stout lower body. He's not really built that way, but he's a very strong player in the interior that has shown flashes to be able to stand and deal with it in the interior, especially when he can play upfield and kind of attack into his blocks. But then he gives you the flexibility where if you wanted to kick him out and, you know, down the road, if you want him and Paschal to work back and forth, you could absolutely do that. This guy has played wide before. The issue that I have, if it's too much splash plays, it's Rutgers was like, oh man, that's great. Or Washington, you see really good plays and you see some like, okay, I don't even recognize him. For the traits that he has and the tools that seemingly are there, there's not enough pass rush success for me to really love this player at this point in time. But at pick 61, he's not a top 50 pick. I don't really have an issue with it because I think some of the tools are there. You know, really the best move that I think he has right now is the spin counter pass rush. You saw it against Washington a couple times, and that was successful. I love the vision that he plays with on the ball carrier run defense-wise. He seems to always know where the ball is. I think that's an excellent trait as a run defender that can carry over to being able to play in a lot of different positions. You talk about the first step get off. Laterally, it's a problem. It is an absolute problem. The ability to slant or set up stunts as a pass rusher, though I don't think he plays with those. Sometimes I think he gets a little bit rounded outside when he's trying to get upfield. The first step get off upfield is not the same, and you'll see flashes of it. Like I remember one against Washington, I was like, oh, that looked awesome, but it's so far few in between. It's like I don't see that enough out of the player, and right now that's the biggest issue that I have with this player is that the tools are there, the size is there, there's flash production there, but it hasn't all been put together yet. I like the motor that he plays with. The football intelligence to me is solid. I think he'd be a little bit slow dealing with down blocks, but to me, it's like you just almost need to speed up his process a little bit as a run defender, depending on where he sits, and if you put him in one position, that may help him. He also has to get himself more clean consistently on blocks. He has the length, has the upper body strength, and you'll see him get close, but there's too many times where he's not cleanly getting off of blocks to stack and shed in the interior. And at the same time as a pass rusher, he needs to bring along a more consistent pass rush toolbox because the bull rush is not consistently there for him, and he can't just rely on having that. He's not really built like that, and if he's not doing that consistently in college, I don't expect him to consistently be doing that in the NFL. I would explain it as I don't think that he has a go-to move as a pass rusher. The positive is as the game rolls along, he feels like he's more and more impactful, but the go-to move that he can just rely on doesn't seem to be there. So with that, I'm going with Chris Jenkins. This is a great opportunity to plug him in behind a guy like Lee McNeil. You could move him across the defensive line, and we know the Detroit Lions value defensive line. So to mix it up, I went with Chris Jenkins. As I said, I'm not following just needs. I'm going after players that I like by spot. Speaking of that, let's make something interesting happen. So this is a very interesting pick, and it's one of these guys that I had to keep watching over and over and over, and I'm like, I got to watch another game. I got to watch another game because it wasn't there for me. It took so long, but then there was just these splashes, and you'd be like, oh, dang, that was okay, wait, hold it. Maybe there's more there. And this is who I ended up selecting. So, Detroit Lions, we had originally picked at 88 because of the trade that we made with the Green Bay Packers in the first pick that we received in round 3 after moving back from pick number 73. But I took number 88, and I moved it up to pick 80 with the Cincinnati Bengals. In return, the Bengals got pick 88, 164, and 205. I get pick 80. And with pick 80, the Detroit Lions address the receiver position in a very unique way with Malachi Corley, wide receiver, Western Kentucky. Now, I call him a receiver, but honestly, you could just call him like get the ball in the dude's hands and just see what happens, all right? I really wrote down as one of my notes, just give it to him one-on-one. Good luck with that. I just want to see that. Like, give it to him one-on-one. Let any defensive back try to deal with that guy. And typically, that idea is not something I would have been bought into here whatsoever, because the idea of his biggest strength being when the ball's in his hands does not necessarily something that I love. I'm like, I don't know if I like that. I mean, he's a receiver. I want him to go make plays. And when you lose Josh Reynolds, I'm looking for a much more like, oh, this guy points to a direct replacement for Josh Reynolds. Like, for example, Brendan Rice. Not all the same, but I'm like, okay, size, outside, he plays on the line of scrimmage. That would make sense. But this is a player very unique package-wise. I'm just going to take a swing on it. We brought Peoples-Jones back. We have Antoine Green. Let's just go get a guy that is just so darn fun to watch. While Corley may not be the most elusive, the contact balance, he plays a lot faster once the ball is in his hands, and the vision is excellent in space. It's a problem for DB. He's just a playmaker, just simply put like that. Listed at about 5'10.5", 207 pounds. He is, to me, pressing elite once the ball is in his hands. Like, I don't think there's anything like that in this draft. I haven't seen every receiver. I've seen a lot of them. I don't think there's a guy like that in this draft with the ball in his hands. But it's not even just as a receiver, it's also as a back. Like, if you just said he was a running back, which I believe he was a former running back, he is so darn threatening once the ball hits his hands. And Western Kentucky seemingly really just shifted their offense to, let's get the ball in his hands as fast as we can. I mean, there would be plays where they would go out and the first 4 passes would go directly to him. And they were basically, it was like, hey, run a curl route, run a screen. It was like, just get the ball in his hands, let him do something crazy with it. I mean, they would run trick plays just based on Malachi Corley. Now, this was a player that I actually got a lot more buy-in by watching 2022, seeing him against teams like Auburn and Indiana. And I was like, okay, there's something here, because you really question, can he get open, right? Like, how deep can this route tree get? Because it's so limited in college right now. For me, the biggest concern that I have is honestly to the hand side of things, because while he'll make some outstanding grabs, he has the upper body flexibility to just pluck things that are behind him. He has strong hands. He does show that. I do have issues in terms of finishing the process, where when he grabs it, he's starting to tuck it into his body, he drops the football or gets knocked out. I have issues with that. I think he can have focus drops where he's just double catching the football and it should be easier, or he's using the wrong technique for where the ball is. Like, he's trying to put his hands, like this, and the ball's like down at his legs, and it's like, what the heck are we doing here? And, some of that is just being more natural as a receiver. I think there's some things that do pop up in terms of hands where you're like, that doesn't look natural. Yet he shows some incredible grabs, and I don't see any sort of fear working the middle of the field. Like, he's got fast reactive hands, which helps him in tight windows. Biggest thing there is I would like for him to, in contest situations, to go get the football. I think too often you get him kind of like not attacking the ball or getting a different type of aggressiveness when the ball's a little bit more in a 50-50 spot than he is. And at level 3, when windows can close on him, especially because he's not that kind of separator right now, that's one of those areas where you're just not getting enough success. And that's the concern. It really is. I think he is a better separator than a route runner at this point. But that comes back to, there is some savviness to his route running. I think there's a little bit of nuance. Okay, I give him a slightly above average grade here. There's craftiness in his head nods, craftiness in sort of the way that he tries to open up leverage a little bit. Obviously, he has a lot of route strength, which helps him a ton, though I think there's way too often where he's just running into contact. He's dealing with context like, hey, we got to get off that a lot cleaner. I think there's some agility within his game as well that does pop up. So I think there's things there, but he's not sudden out of his breaks. He's not really going to run away from coverage. He tested in with a 4.56 40 time, which is not going to blow anybody away. I do think that he has plus route lean, which is one of the best little aspects that I think could open up so much upside in terms of separation. It's not like on the Brian Thomas level, but it's like he's got something there, and that makes me optimistic. So to me, this is one that it's not like as simple as, well, he's just replacing Josh Reynolds, right? That's going to be, hey, more as a group, we have to replace that. But Malachi Corley is one of the best weapons that I think are out there, and I just want to see with a little bit more time, let him develop. I want to see what this thing turns into. So I'm going to take Corley. I'm going to put him in this offense with Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, and for Easy, who loves run after catch, he's going to love this pick. Malachi Corley at pick number 80. All right, let's continue on. We're going to move down to pick number 126. It was acquired by the Green Bay Packers. So this was the second pick that I got for the Packers. This kind of closed the gap a little bit for me in the 4th round after trading up. And with the 121st pick on day 3 of the NFL draft, the Detroit Lions select Javon Solomon. I hope I'm saying his name right. I apologize if I'm not, but this is the edge defender out of Troy, who lists in at just under 6 foot tall, 246 pounds. Yes, definitely on the undersized side of things, but there's a couple edge rushers in this draft that actually take advantage of that, using leverage to their advantage, and they win. They just get under pads, they get under your hands. I think there's a couple players that do that, but to me, what Javon Solomon has is he also has a lot more than that, right? He doesn't live on I win with leverage, or, the aspect of, yes, he led the FBS in sacks, but he played against Troy competition. And while that is a thing, right, playing playing at Troy, the competition can be, you know, a little bit questionable. What I think that he has is he has a real toolbox as a pass rusher, and it starts with the thing that I start as a pass rusher, which is an instinctual pass rusher, setting up an offensive tackle, but also being able to read an offensive tackle set and win off of that. I think that's a huge part of pass rushing, is having the instincts to be able to feel it and work off it, and I think that's something that he does extremely well. Now, as a run defender, I think one thing is for sure, you're going to have struggles putting in between tackles. I don't think that's what you want to do. Troy did that at times. You're not going to do that in the NFL. Don't do that with Javon Solomon here, because when you do that, it kind of limit his ability as a run defender. Number one, he's not really built in the lower body to handle and hold his ground, so double teams can wash him out of the play, especially at the NFL. I believe that they will, even if he's playing with good leverage. The second thing to that, he's much more turns into like a one-gap shooter, and I don't think that's what the Lions defense is, so you have to keep him kind of in that edge roll stand-up. If you played him in kind of that Sam backer role specifically, and then on third downs, you sub him in to be a pass rush specialist. Yes, as a fourth-round pick, we may have a pass rush specialist here, and I'm absolutely okay with that. That's not to say he can't play the run. I think he absolutely can play the run. He consistently wins with stack and shed. He has excellent length. I mean, you're talking about just under 34-inch arms for a guy at his height is just kind of rare. It doesn't really make sense. Some solid upper body strength. I think his hand usage definitely needs work in a lot of different areas, but you do see that it syncs up with his footwork, specifically in some of the hand swipes that he can use to win on the outside. He brings inside, outside winning versatility. He can create an edge and win. He opens up long arm opportunities. He stays low to the ground, can get off the line with leverage. I think his first step is laterally, his ability to set an edge very quickly. I do like that. I think you'll get aspects where he can cover ground really well in terms of his strides, and he can show good bursts off the line, though the reaction speed isn't elite. And that's the biggest issue that I honestly have as a pass rusher, is I wish I was more blown away with his first step. Like I said, I think Braylon Trice is one of the best in the draft, and that's where it starts as a pass rusher. So there's a real possibility that a guy like this could fall, I think, because I don't think he's elite in that category. I also don't love his agility necessarily either. Okay, I think he gets a little bit more of a straight line player, but he plays really low, plays with some real knee bend. Though he's not the most flexible at the top of the pass rush, plays with knee bend, plays with ankle strength to deal with contact and still finish. So to me here, yeah, I might be getting a little bit more of a pass rush specialist, which I'm okay with, but I think this is a player that has shown effectiveness against the run. It's just more about finding the right role for him. But I'm going to roll with it. We're going to take Javon Solomon here. We're going to add to this defense, and now the defensive front has inserted Chris Jenkins and Solomon with what we already have, and I'm feeling good about this. Now you put Nate Wiggins in the back end. I'm loving where this defense is going. So let's continue. We have a couple picks left here. We're going to go to 211. Now, if you're asking how did I get 211, I made a trade. The final trade that I made is I moved from 201 back 10 spots with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, again, I followed the trade value chart. This was pretty even. So what I did is I moved back 10 spots, and I acquired 211, but also 215 from San Fran. They got 201 and my 249 pick, so my last pick in the draft in the 7th round. They moved up, took the running back out of Missouri that I'm not a huge fan of, so I'm okay with that. I didn't think I missed out on anything there. But, I mean, San Fran, you know, they probably will take another running back. So I moved back a few spots, and I felt really good about this because at pick 211, the Detroit Lions select Josh Wallace, cornerback, Michigan. All right, now I know I said cornerback, but I really do think that there's real potential for flexibility here to go to safety. I know that there's later round safeties, Oladapo, Hampton. There's some later round safeties that are intriguing, especially on the simulator, but I went with a guy that I've honestly seen more than those players. But also Josh Wallace, to me, like, I'm so intrigued of do teams see flexibility here. And this was a player that is a transfer from UMass, 3-time captain at UMass, goes to Michigan this past season, plays really well, just listed in at about 5'11", 185 pounds. Biggest issue was he ran a 4.69 40. That's pretty awful at his pro. 4.69 40 is awful for the cornerback position, and that's where you get to the point of, like, I don't know if this guy can stick at corner simply based on that alone, because his play speed does not look that bad. I think he's got average play speed, and when you consider that 40 time, you would expect that that's going to be horrible. It doesn't look that bad. And from all the games that I went through, I didn't see consistent issues with just getting ran by. There were certain guys where you're like, oh, that's a problem. I didn't see that issue. I thought he protected it well. Also, part of that was Michigan's defense. They were very versatile defensively, did a lot of zone coverage as well mixed in there too. But I will say this with Josh Wallace, I think he's very efficient in his footwork, and this is a player that while he may not have like the natural, like, okay, long speed range to put him at a single high safety spot, and you could have questions about like how easy would that translate to that spot, or do you leave him at corner, can he plug him in the slot? I'll say this, I think he'd be a very effective special teamer when you're at the 6th round. I think that's something that you have to start with. To me, his run support is very good. He's a real tackler, wraps up on tackles, protects the edge, battles offensive line, which a lot of offensive tackles won't even try to do. He plays with the right attitude, I think, think, as a run defender. And then when you watch him in coverage, I actually had pretty strong grades in coverage. Off-man coverage, I thought he was a good off-man coverage corner. The communication was a huge part of that. I thought the footwork was a huge part of that. I don't love some of the space at the catch point that he allows, but he constantly does this, punches it loose as it's being tucked at. Of leverage very early. I thought he was balanced in his pedal movement, really sat himself down when he was getting depth, and he's very accurate with the decisions to get in a half turn and turn and run and get on top of a receiver vertically. There's issues that could come along with this being threatened over top where they can kind of park it down on his routes a little bit. And as a press corner, I thought the footwork did show a little bit here. Is like, okay, his foot speed is just limited at the spot, so you can have some issues with press, and then you can see it where he'll kind of get split in his footwork, and then they can kind of beat him off the line of scrimmage. And then when you talk about recovery, he doesn't really bring recovery burst. Though he's patient, he doesn't really bring the burst for that. I thought he graded out higher at his best in zone coverage because he squeezes routes in underneath coverage. He's constantly communicating, said off-man and zone coverage. Really good vision. He plays with just natural awareness in zone coverage. So at times the eye balance, I thought would be a little bit hit and miss, a little bit late, specifically in quarters coverage. To me here, this is a thing where I don't know exactly where his spot's going to fit. Even though he played man coverage and he was successful at Michigan, I don't know that that's going to naturally just travel to the NFL. I don't think that it really can because of that 40 time, but I do think that whether that's trying to push him at safety, whether that's trying to make him like a little bit of a nickel corner, but mainly using him on special teams early, this is a player that you got to find a spot for him, but I just really liked watching the player. So I'm okay with taking the swing here. I understand it's another cornerback, but I think there's more flexibility outside of that, and I have no issue with it. Like, there's a reason he's going this late because there's athletic limitations, but I think that he utilizes his footwork really well to mask that, and you wouldn't really know it unless you looked at the time. So with that being said, Josh Wallace is a Lion, and that leads to our final pick, which is our second 6th round pick, 215, which we also acquired from San Fran, and this is Brandon Coleman, offensive tackle out of TCU, the 6'4", 313-pound left tackle / left guard. He's even played right guard in his career. I mean, this is a guy that's kind of done it all. I think he's more of a guard prospect, so he does bring the arm length. So with that, like, you could probably play him at tackle and continue to work him at tackle if you wanted to. I don't know that some of the reactive athleticism or really anchor would be ideal at the guard position, but we're at the tackle position. What translates to guard is his quickness off the line of scrimmage. You even see it as a zone blocker. He's very fluid into pulling as an offensive lineman, working his way up to second level. There's sustainability that shows up in his game as well. Now, he can get outside of his pass. His control can be a little bit loose in terms of just kind of flying by blocks, or specifically you'll see his base get out from under him, or being able to set a really natural anchor as the play continues to roll on. He can win a lot quicker, but as the rep rolls on, I think you could have some problems there. You get some second effort losses specifically, and his pad level is not big time. You can really see he kind of stands out like, oh, that guy's kind of tall. So that's going to be an issue because I don't know if you can consistently get that down. He still showed some drive movement, which was a little bit surprising. He's extremely well built from length to just the way that he's built in the lower body, the frame that he brings to the table. He's really well built, and he has adequate athleticism for me to be a zone scheme player as well. I think there's flexibility in what you want him to do. So for me, I'm going with a guy that potentially could be your backup tackle, might be your backup guard. I think he's probably more so of a guard because of his quickness off the line. I think it would help him more for longevity. But with that being said, he can honestly probably do both in a pinch. He'll come in, he'll step in, he'll compete for either position I think you want him to. So with that, that wraps up the Detroit Lions mock draft. I'll throw it back on the screen here so you could take a little bit of a look at it. We clearly addressed defense heavily in this one. Secondary got a couple players added. I could have went safety with Josh Wallace, but I just really like Josh Wallace, and I'm willing to just say, hey, figure it out. You know, find a spot for that guy. But Nate Wiggins makes their cornerback room, I think, big time, and I think that's the biggest issue with last year when you talk about sacks. You're top of the league in pressure rate, yet you can't get sacks. You got to be better in the back end. Lions address that. Let's go make it elite, and that's what we do with Wiggins. I don't think he's Devin Witherspoon, all right? I will say this, though. From any player that I've watched reactive athletically, he's the closest thing I've seen to Devin Witherspoon. So if Lions were truly interested in this past season, this is a guy that I believe that they would also be interested in, okay? I don't see some of that fire. Like, Witherspoon was just ridiculous. Like, that guy played like you know, he was lit on fire or something. You don't get that necessarily here, but Nate Wiggins is a guy that to me he reminds me so much of a lot of those big-time traits. So outside of that, though, defense, added some pass rush, potentially got a future big-time run defender here in Chris Jenkins, but also he needs to develop pass rush as well, but a lot of flexibility. Receiver that's just get the ball in his hands and watch him work. Then outside of that, Coleman, just to add some offensive line depth. I don't think Coleman will go this late, but I could also see it because I don't know that he has a trump card, so we'll see on that one. With that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.